I was out in the hallway during worship and it was standing room only. I'd like to think that's because you heard I was preaching. I know it's because of the potluck. Thank you. You are too kind. The good news is it's a relatively short sermon, so we'll get to lunch fairly quickly. Our habit here at the Vine is to preach through a book at the time. We take a book of the Bible, we preach through every last verse of it. We don't leave out the difficult parts. That also means that we're not picking verses to fit what's happening in the country or what's happening in the life of the people in the church. So if something that we preach hits you, it was God, not us, right? We're not targeting you. That's just the scripture that came up today. We've been working our way through the book of 1 Samuel. We started back in September, took a few weeks off for Christmas. Today we find ourselves in chapter 11. And I'm going to start, as all great sermons start, with a Lord of the Rings clip.
I see in your eyes the same fear that would take the heart of me. A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day. An hour of wolves and shattered shields when the age of men comes crashing down. But it is not this day. This day we fight. By all that you hold dear on this good earth, I bid you stand, men of the West!
I've got goosebumps. Leslie puts together the slides for us. Thank you so much for your hard work. And she said, it's going to be interesting to see how you work this into the passage. So hopefully it'll fit. We'll get there in a little while. Let's start with our passage. We are in chapter 11. We're doing the whole chapter. Then Nahash the Amorite went up and besieged Jabesh Gilead. And all the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, make a treaty with us, and we will serve you. But Nahash the Amorite said to them, on this condition I will make a treaty with you, that I gouge out your right eyes, and thus bring disgrace on all of Israel. The elders of Jabesh said to him, give us 7 days' respite, that we may send messengers through all the territory of Israel. Then if there is no one to save us, we will give ourselves to you. When the messengers came to Gibeath of Saul, they reported the matter in the ears of the people, and all the people wept aloud. Now behold, Saul was coming from the field behind the oxen. And Saul said, what is wrong with the people that they are weeping? So they told him the news of the men of Jabesh. And the Spirit of God rushed upon Saul when he heard these words, and his anger was greatly kindled. He took a yoke of oxen and cut them in pieces, and sent them throughout the territory of Israel by the hand of messengers, saying, whoever does not come out after Saul and Samuel, we shall do likewise shall be done to his oxen. Then the dread of the Lord fell upon the people, and they came out as one man. When he mustered them at Bezek, the people of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Joshua 30,000. And they said to the messengers who had come, thus shall you say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, tomorrow, by the time the sun is hot, you shall have salvation. When the messengers came and told the men of Jabesh, they were glad. Therefore the men of Jabesh said, tomorrow we will give ourselves up to you, and you may do whatever seems good to you. And the next day Saul put the people in 3 companies. And they came into the midst of the camp in the morning watch, and struck down the Amorites until the heat of the day. And those who survived were scattered, so that no 2 of them were left together. Then the people said to Samuel, who is it that said, shall Saul reign over us? Bring them in, that we may put them to death. But Saul said, not a man shall be put to death this day, for today the Lord has worked salvation in Israel. Thus Samuel said to the people, come, let us go to Gilgal, and there renew the kingdom. So all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal. Then they sacrificed peace offerings before the Lord, and there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced gladly. Now before we move on, I want to give you a little bit of extra text. This text was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's also in Josephus's 20-volume Antiquities of the Jews, the same exact text. So Josephus long ago had this text, and then somehow it fell out of favor or got lost, and then we found it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I read way too much textual criticism. How many of you have read textual criticism? It's better than melatonin for going to sleep, right? But I read a lot of it, and I'm leaning towards this being a valid thing that we should add to what we're reading today. I'll let you do what you want with that. It is now included, this text now included the New American Bible, the New English Bible, the New Revised Version. Let's read it from the New Revised Standard Version. Now Nahash, king of the Amorites, had been grievously oppressing the Gadiites and the Reubenites. He would gouge out the right eye of each of them and would not grant Israel a deliverer. No one was left of the Israelites across the Jordan whose right eye Nahash, king of the Amorites, had not gouged out. But there were 7,000 men who had escaped from the Amorites and had entered Jabesh Gilead. About a month later, Nahash the Amorite went up and besieged Jabesh Gilead. Now this text doesn't add significantly to the story. It doesn't really change it, but it does fill in some blanks. It kind of helps to explain what we're seeing here. And as I said, I'm learning towards this being valid. You do with that what you want. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you that hundreds and thousands of years later, your word is still relevant to us. That when we read your word, the words, the language is strange sometimes, difficult to pronounce. The people aren't relevant to us, but the actions, the activities, and how you interplay with them, it's all relevant to us. And we can see in that things that will strike our hearts and that will encourage us and challenge us. And so I pray that's what you do with my words today, Lord, that you would encourage and you would challenge. In Jesus' name. Now I need to give a disclaimer up front. I have made no attempt today to make any parallels or analogies to current politics, politicians, or parties. Okay, I think we've gotten to where we have to say that. I'm sorry, but that's where we are. However, as I worked through the text, I saw places where I went, I've made that mistake in my life. And when I say mistake, what I mean is sin, but let's be nice about it. I've made these mistakes. Greg this morning talked about the ways that we fall away. And so I've got 8 points that are mistakes, sins, ways that we fall away that I'm going to look at today. Last week we read chapter 10, and in chapter 10, Saul is proclaimed king. All the people proclaim him king. But it didn't change anything, right? At the end of the chapter, what happens? They all went home. Hey, we got a king. They all go home and just go on about their business. There's no change. Saul goes home, continues to farm. There was a great problem with the Philistines, had been attacking for a long time. Saul didn't do anything about that. It was just sort of, well, okay, we have a king. How's that affect anything? In fact, the Philistines are going to be a problem for Saul throughout his entire life. In Samuel 14, we'll get to that in a few weeks here, it says, there was hard fighting against the Philistines all the days of Saul. So this was a problem that was there the entire time he was king. As I said, Saul had gone back to farming. It's not an auspicious start to being the king. It's not a great start to his kingdom. But then, this is about a month after that, we think, there comes an attack on a town that's about 40 miles southwest. So it's not a long way from where Saul is. So we'll start again in verse 1. Then Nahash the Amorite went up and besieged Jabesh Gilead. Now the Amorites were descendants of Lot by drunken incest that was instigated by one of his daughters. Lovely story. And God had actually commanded them, the Israelites, to not attack the Amorites. We read about that in Deuteronomy. And when you approach the territory of the people of Ammon, do not harass them or contend with them. For I will not give you any of the land of the people of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the sons of Lot for a possession. Unfortunately, the Amorites didn't play by the same rules. The Israelis were not allowed to attack the Amorites. The Amorites attacked the Israelis. And this has been a problem for quite a while. Judges 3:13 talks about them allying with the king Eglon to attack and defeat Israel. And then in Judges 10:9, more recently, it says, "And the Amorites crossed the Jordan to fight also against Judah and against Benjamin and against the house of Ephraim." So that Israel was severely distressed. If we accept what I read from the Dead Sea Scrolls earlier, then this had been going on at the time before and then at the time that Saul was being crowned as king. Jabesh Gilead was a town in Gilead. It was northwest of Jordan. It is sometimes referred to as Jabesh Gilead and sometimes just Jabesh. We've seen both in our text. It is the same town. The first biblical mention of this town is in a story that is found in Judges 19 through 21. It's a rather long text, so rather than reading it, I will summarize it. A Levite and his concubine stopped on their travels for a night in Gibeath, a Benjamite town. And some, they're described as worthless men, came and banged on the door and said, "Send the Levite out so that we may have sex with him." If that sounds familiar to you, that's exactly what happened in Sodom. Lot had the angels, same thing happened there. The host, being a good host, said, "No, I'm not sending him out, but here's his concubine." Not my idea. Anyway, that's what happened. So he sends the concubine out. The next morning, the concubine is found dead on the doorstep. And the Levite is not impressed with this. He's quite angry. And he does what any of us would do. He hacks her into pieces and sends her throughout the country. No, most of you wouldn't do that? Okay. That is what he did all the same. And this started a war. This started a war between the Benjamites, the tribe that had done this atrocious thing, and the other 11 tribes. And this war pretty much wiped out the Benjamites. They were almost exterminated. And at the last minute, the Israelis said, "Now wait, we can't wipe out one of the 12 tribes of Israel. We have to do something." Well, they started looking around, and they found out that no men from Jabesh Gilead had come to the fight. All of Israel had been called to this fight. The men of Jabesh Gilead didn't show up. So their solution was, we'll go to Jabesh Gilead, we'll kill everybody we find except for 400 virgins, we'll give them to the 400 Benjamites who are still hanging around, problem solved. Okay, now the reason I bring this whole gruesome text up is because there are obvious similarities in what we're reading today. Also, Saul is from the tribe of Benjamin, so he almost certainly had family ties in Jabesh Gilead. So continuing verse 1. "And all the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, 'Make a treaty with us, and we will serve you.'" Obviously, the city thought they had no chance of winning a battle because they say, "Hey, we'll make a treaty with you." Well, that sounds good. What a treaty meant was, we're going to pay you tribute. We're going to be subject to you. You are basically going to be our king. Now, it's interesting to consider what the men of Jabesh Gilead did not do. They did not call out to God. They did not ask to have the ark brought to them. We've seen this in the past. When a city was threatened, they'd say, "Bring the ark to us, the presence of God to us, that we might win in battle." They didn't do that. And they didn't say, "Hey, we got a king now, and you all are in trouble because he's going to come and spank you." They didn't do any of that. Back in chapter 10, last week, we're told that Samuel brought all the tribes of Israel near, and that when he presented Saul as king, all the people shouted, "Long live the king." Okay, they were all excited about this. But now, a month later, this town is ready to bow down to a Gentile king. They don't think there is any salvation for them. That brings me to my first point. Sometimes what we say when life is good is not what is in our hearts. When the going gets tough, our actions show what we really think and who we really trust. So the people are ready to bow down to Nahash. By the way, Nahash's name in Hebrew means snake or serpent. And the snake is not going to make it easy for them. He could have just accepted, but no, he's going to make it difficult. Verse 2, "But Nahash the Amorite said to them, 'On this condition I will make a treaty with you, that I gouge out all your right eyes and thus bring disgrace to Israel.'" Now the removal of an eye is both gruesome and brilliant from Nahash's standpoint. Because with only one eye, you don't have depth perception, and you have a limited field of vision. And that means you're no good in a fight. You cannot make war. You cannot defend yourself. However, you can plant and raise crops. You can tend to herds. So you can do the things that allow you to pay tribute, but you're not a threat. Also, you're dependent because you can't defend yourself against anybody else out there. Nahash is now a necessary evil in your life because if you're attacked, he's the one that's going to come and rescue you. But why the right eye? It specifies the right eye. And the Dead Sea Scrolls text also specified the right eye. Why the right eye? Well, at that time, right was considered good, left was considered evil. It was a bad thing to be a left-handed dude in Israel at that time. You probably faked it with the right hand because you were evil if you walked around doing things with your left hand. And that was kind of applied to the entire body. Later, rabbinical texts talk about the eyes in general and the right eye in particular being associated with good health and with fortune. So Nahash wasn't just saying, I'm going to take an eye. He was saying, I'm going to take the good eye. Right? Every Jewish man would rather lose his left eye than his right eye. So even in this, Nahash is making it difficult for them. And can you imagine considering this? Yeah, sure, you can have my right eye, my wife's, my kids, my neighbors, go for it. I mean, that's brutal. I can't get my head around that. And yet they were willing to do that. Have you ever accepted something horrible because you felt it was the lesser of two evils? For example, you're in a dark alley and a guy shows up with a weapon and says, give me your purse or give me your wallet. And as much as you don't want to part with your money, that seems wiser than getting shot or stabbed. Okay, that makes sense. But what if what is being asked of you is morally questionable or is just outright sin? And the example of that would be, deny Christ right here, right now, or I'm going to kill you. Now, most of us have never faced that. Nellie can tell you there are people around the world who do face that, who are given that choice. And some die because they refuse to stand against Christ in that moment. Sometimes the choices are difficult. Sometimes they're impossible. Sometimes accepting a bad option is wisdom. Other times it's not. And sometimes it's a sin. The trick is knowing which is which. The elders of Jabesh Gilead did not reject the eye gouging outright, but they did ask for a reprieve. The elders of Jabesh said to them, give us 7 days respite, that we may send messengers through all the territory of Israel. Then, if there is no one to save us, we will give ourselves up to you. And surprisingly, the snake agrees to this. We don't actually read that. The text doesn't tell us that, but we see all the days after, and he hasn't made an attack, so clearly he gave them those 7 days, and they sent out messengers. Now, why would he do that? Maybe he assumed nobody would come to help. Maybe he assumed some help would come and it wouldn't be enough. He'd been doing this before, and there was a habit of the Western tribes not showing up to help, so he had good reason to think they wouldn't. By doing it this way, assuming that they're not going to get the help, he's making it easy on himself. He's not going to have to fire a shot. He's not going to lose any men in the battle. I mean, he had no reason to think he could lose, but he would lose some people. This way, he doesn't lose anybody. It also makes it all the more humiliating, and it makes it clear to the people of the city that they have no other help. No one's coming to help you. You're all alone. So you better hang on to me because I'm the best shot you've got. It's interesting to note that the messages were then sent to all the territory of Israel. All right, they didn't send it to Saul. They didn't send it to the king. It was just a scatter shot everywhere. We hope somebody, anybody, will show up to help us. Verse 4, when the messengers came to Gibeath of Saul, they reported the matter in the ears of the people, and all the people wept aloud. So even when messengers arrive in the king's city, they don't go looking for the king. And when the people hear this, they don't say, oh, Saul's out in the field. Go get him. He's going to help you. No, they wept. They wept because they thought, this is hopeless. Nobody looked to the king for help. Verse 5, now behold, Saul was coming from the field behind the oxen. And Saul said, what is wrong with the people that they are weeping? So they told him the news of the men of Jabesh. Did you notice what the king was doing? The king was out in the field. Scholars think he was probably threshing wheat. But he was out there with the oxen. Oxen are not a great animal. They're dirty. They're stinky. And that's what he's doing. Okay, this is not kingly. He is king in name only at this point. Verse 6, and the Spirit of God rushed upon Saul when he heard these words, and his anger was greatly kindled. Okay, Saul is the king, but what we see here is that God is the one who is acting. And this is a righteous anger that God is giving Saul. He is righteously angry about what's going to happen to the people of Jabesh Gilead if he doesn't act. Point 3, anger is a tricky thing. Most human anger is neither righteous nor of God. And James warns us about this very clearly. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. All manner of abominations have been committed because of anger wrongly attributed to God. This happens on the national level. It happens all the way down to the personal level. Right? We have petty acts of racism all the way up to ethnic cleansing that has been done in the name of Jesus. Point 4. Have you ever justified something wrong by citing your anger? Have you ever convinced yourself and then tried to convince others that your anger was righteous and God-inspired when in fact it was not? And if you're married, I would add, have you ever done this to your spouse? Or maybe I should say, when did you last do this to your spouse? Now, Saul has been brought to anger by God. And when that happens, it does produce the righteousness of God. Verse 7, he took a yoke of oxen and cut them into pieces and sent them throughout all the territory of Israel by the hand of the messengers, saying, whoever does not come out after Saul and Samuel, so shall it be done to his ox. Then the dread of the Lord fell upon the people, and they came out as one man. How many of you have ever butchered a cow? Anybody here? A couple. We did 2 cows this fall. It's a lot of work. We had a number of guys for a number of hours. Now, granted, we're making cuts of meat. He was just hacking it to pieces. But it's still, this is not like 5 minutes of swinging your sword and you got a pile of pieces. He's dissecting a couple of oxen. This thing took a lot of time. And all the people are probably standing around watching as he's doing this. It's quite the spectacle. It definitely gets their attention. Now, the ox being cut into pieces and sent throughout the country, of course, mirrors what I read earlier about the concubine being cut to pieces and sent throughout the country. That had happened, Judges 20 was about 40 years earlier, 4 decades. So some of those people who had been around for that were still around now. That, and let's be honest, this is the kind of the story that gets repeated, right? Around the campfire. Hey, remember the time that Levite cut his concubine up and sent her all over the country? That's the way we are. We tell the gruesome stories, we repeat them. So I figure pretty much everybody here knew exactly what was going on, what that mirrored. Now, did God do that? Did God mirror that to spur them on? Or was it Saul's idea to do that? Saul is acting under the Holy Spirit here, so I'm going to say either way that God was the one who was putting this in play. Now, the first time around with the concubine, the failure of the man of Jabesh Gilead to answer the call had resulted in the destruction of their town. Okay, so there's a very real threat implied here. It's not that we're going to kill you this time, but the clear threat is after we beat the Amorites, and we're going to beat the Amorites, then we're coming for your ox unless you come to fight with us. Saul invokes the name of Samuel here, along with his own name. He says Saul and Samuel. Now, maybe that was wisdom. Maybe that was just self-doubt. We don't know. But it was a really good idea. And what he's doing is saying, come and fight with me, your king. And here's the spokesman of our real king, God. Fight with him too. Okay, he's including God by including Samuel. A few weeks ago, we read in chapter 8 about Samuel warning what a king would be like. And we'll read that. He said, this is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Some he will assign to commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants. Your male and female servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own. And he will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. That sounds like a great deal, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. When we first read this a few weeks ago, I'm thinking, why did these people go for that? Because they all, in response to this, they cheered, we want a king. We want this. Why did they do that? Did they hear what Samuel said? Maybe they thought he was exaggerating for effect. It won't be that bad. Maybe they thought, well, some of that here and there, but it won't be that bad. Maybe they thought, well, yeah, it'll happen to my neighbors, but not me, right? We think, somehow we're going to escape what everybody else suffers from. Why did they think this was a good deal? And our passage today answers that, why they thought it was a good deal. And that's why I showed the clip earlier. Because what Aragorn does in that clip is he inspires them to go beyond themselves. They're terrified. You see it in their eyes. There's nothing but fear there. And he addresses that fear and he draws out of them something that they could not do on their own. He gets them to fight. And that's what the Israelis wanted. They wanted a human king. They wanted a charismatic leader who would do exactly what Aragorn done, exactly what Saul is doing in this passage. He is getting them to fight. I mean, before he did his thing, they were all weeping about, oh, Jabesh Gilead is done for. No one can help them. He inspires them to do what they need to do. Now, of course, the danger of a charismatic leader moving us to act is we have to make sure the leader is acting in the way God would have him. History is rife with charismatic leaders who have inspired all kinds of horrible acts. The sad truth is that we are far too easily manipulated. But today, in our passage today, this is God doing it, not man. We read that the dread of the Lord fell upon the people. The Hebrew translated as dread means fear of impending danger or judgment. What it sounds to me like is that God is pushing them to do it. The fear of the consequences of not going out to war is far greater than the fear of going to war. And again, this is God who's doing it. John Woodhouse says, there is nothing heroic in this. It is not noble or virtuous. Just as Saul's rage was inspired by God's Spirit, so the people's response to Saul was brought about by the hand of God upon them. So God stirred both Saul to act, and then he moved on the people to follow. Verse 8. When he mustered them at Bezek, the people of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000. Now it's interesting here that the people are divided into two groups, Israel and Judah, because this is 50 years before the kingdom divides. I'm thinking this is a little bit of foreshadowing. Because splits don't just happen overnight, right? Whether it's a church split or a divorce or your best friend, splits take time. Little things get in, slowly divide us. Eventually the gulf becomes so big we feel we can't fix it, and that's when the split happens. And a wise person sees that really early and fights to prevent that, deals with those things so that the split doesn't happen. That's not what happened with Judah and Israel. We will see that they split. They become two kingdoms. Now, some of the scholars I read suggested the weak showing of Judah showed they're already leaning towards isolation. They're already pulling away from Israel. Others point out that they had their hands full with the Philistines. They were already fighting ongoing wars with the Philistines. They were busy. Now, we don't see anybody complaining in this passage, but humans being what humans are, I suspect there were people who, after the fight, said, wait, you all didn't show up in nearly the numbers you should have. I think there was probably some grumbling going on about that. Verse 9, and they said to the messengers who had come, thus shall you say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, tomorrow by the time the sun is hot, you shall have salvation. When the messengers came and told the men of Jabesh, they were glad. Therefore the men of Jabesh said, tomorrow we will give ourselves to you, and you may do whatever seems good to you. So they send the messages back to Jabesh Gilead, and what they say indicates they'll be traveling by night and attacking early in the morning. And the men of Jabesh Gilead think, well, we can help. We're going to give some disinformation to the troops. We're going to sow some fake news out there. So they tell them, we're going to surrender in the morning. When in fact, by the time they would be supposedly surrendering, the battle will already have been joined. And human nature here is the troops hear this. Oh, they're going to surrender. Okay, they relax. Maybe they celebrate. Maybe there's some alcohol. Maybe everybody goes to bed late. They certainly are not preparing for a battle the next morning. They're at ease, and that's going to be to their detriment. And the next day, Saul put the people in 3 companies. And they came into the midst of the camp in the morning watch and struck down the Amorites until the heat of the day. And those who survived were scattered, so that no 2 of them were left together. The morning watch is the 4th and last watch of the night. It runs from 3 to 6 a.m. So they're attacking at dawn, maybe a little bit before dawn. They're attacking when a lot of the soldiers would still have been asleep or just waking up. They're getting a real advantage there. The heat of the day it talks about. I grew up in Texas. In Texas, in the fall, the time of this passage would be late summer, early fall. In the fall, it can easily be 100 degrees by noon. Okay, same thing in the Holy Lands. The fall is not a cool time like it is here. It's just a little less hot. And so you didn't want to be doing anything in the heat of the day. You certainly didn't want to be fighting a battle. That was a really bad idea. And Saul had timed this just right. He got the advantage first thing in the morning, and he was able to complete the battle by the heat of the day. At which point, the few survivors are running away. They're scattered. There are no two of them together. Saul's timing was excellent, and his victory was complete. The few troops who did escape were nothing. And just like that, Saul is now a real king. I did not have a Pinocchio picture to put up here. That would have been good. Verse 12. Then the people said to Samuel, "Who is it that said, 'Shall Saul reign over us?' Bring them in, that we may put them to death." But Paul said, "Not a man shall be put to death this day, for today the Lord has worked salvation in Israel." Now, when I read this, I detect a bit of hypocrisy. Okay, only a few people have spoken out against Saul, but if we look at how people behaved, they all agreed with the men who said, "He can't be king over us." Right? Nobody called on Saul to help when Jabesh-Gilead was in trouble. Even the people of Saul's town didn't say, "Oh, the king can help." They were pretty much all thinking what the few had said. But now they want to put those to death. I'm thinking this was their shame and guilt that was causing them to do this. And that's my fifth point. Have you ever done this? Have you called out those who said what you thought when it was shown that what you thought was wrong? Often when we are fast to throw others under the bus, it's because of our own guilt. Saul had the wisdom to step in and say, "No, let it go, don't do this." Even better, he then says, God gave us the victory. He points to God as the source of victory, not himself. He is starting out so well. Everything in chapter 11 is really good. Sadly, it won't last. Only a few years later, God rejects the kingship of Saul. We'll see that in 1 Sam 15 when we get there. I'll read you one passage. And Samuel said to Saul, "I will not return with you, for you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being king over Israel." Point 6, starting well is nice, ending well is better. And sometimes starting well is actually an impediment to ending well. We can think, "Oh, look at me, I've got this," right? It's Saul. Did he decide, I don't need God's help. I can do this on my own? Is that what led to his downfall? Lori and I have worked with a lot of marriages, and we've seen marriages that started really well and then ended in divorce. We've also seen marriages, and frankly ours was the same way, started out really rough and then got better. The condition of your start really is not relevant. If you trust and follow the Lord, your situation will improve year for year. Marriage, job, whatever. Be more concerned about being diligent in moving forward than in where you start. Verse 14, then Samuel said to the people, "Come, let us go to Gilgal, and there renew the kingdom." Now, what does it mean to renew the kingdom? Basically, a month after it had been established. The issue here is that the word kingdom in the Hebrew doesn't mean quite the same thing as we think when we are reading in the English. It means kingship, kingly office, royalty. So this is talking about Saul's kingdom. We're going to renew Saul's kingdom. John Woodhouse suggests another level of kingdom here. The kingdom was both Saul's kingdom and God's kingdom. This is the important issue behind the whole story of Saul. How could there be a human king without rejecting the heavenly king? You've heard Jeremy say this a number of times through Saul, that we have Saul because the people had rejected God as their king. They begged for a human king, having rejected God. They got Saul. They got everything that went along with that. We'll see it's not going to work out so well for them. So here we have Saul. Saul is not the man who would be king. Saul is the man who would not be king. And all of a sudden, he looks kingly. God has made him look like he's able to do it. And so Samuel seizes on this. He's going to improve Saul's position. He's going to reestablish, or maybe we should say establish, the kingdom of Saul. This is actually the third time that Saul's going to be anointed as king. The first time, Saul tracks him down and anoints him privately. And Samuel traps him down. And Saul doesn't say a word about it. Even when his uncle asks him what happened, he doesn't mention, "Oh, I've been anointed king." Nope, no words about it. The second time we read about last week in chapter 10. After they found him hiding the luggage and drug him out, then they anointed him king. And everybody said, "Oh, we got a king, yay." Went home and did nothing about it. This will be the third time. This is the one that sticks. Third time's the charm. This is when they anoint him king, and he really becomes a king for all practical purposes. He now has the approval of the people, and that changes things. And unfortunately, it may be part of why he falls. The passage I read from 1 Samuel 15 is God turning away from him because he did not completely destroy the Amalekites as he had been commanded to do. And when Samuel says, why didn't you do that? Basically, he said, because of the people. He blamed the people. He was more concerned with what they thought and felt than what God did. And that's my seventh point. When you're more concerned about what people think than what God thinks, we're in trouble. But for now, in our passage today, everything is good. Everybody is happy. Verse 15. So all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal. Then they sacrificed peace offerings before the Lord, and there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. It all sounds so good, doesn't it? I mean, they made him king before the Lord. They actually included the Lord, something they hadn't been doing very well. They make peace offerings. Peace offerings signify fellowship and communion of God with his people. But to echo Galatians 3:3, having begun well in the spirit, Saul is going to continue in the flesh, and that's going to be his downfall. And again, I'll ask you, have you ever done this? We have this bad habit of starting something with God's help and then saying, thanks God, I got it from here. Okay, I do this all the time. I'm a little better than I used to be, but this is one I really have to watch out for. I actually found a picture that explains how a lot of us treat the Bible. Why do we do that? It's like, oh my goodness, my life's horrible. I should get my Bible. It was here just last month, right? No, I'm part of the daily reading on the Bind now, I'm glad to say. But I do this with God. It's like, oh, things are bad. Maybe I should pray. Why do I do that? Okay, I don't understand it. I really don't. Do I think that God only has time for my emergencies? Do I think that I have to do some of the small stuff to somehow earn my keep? Is it fear? Is it pride? Why, having started well in the spirit, do I turn to the flesh? And I honestly cannot tell you why that is something I struggle with. It's something I'm going to have to pray about a lot more. That's the point that nailed me this morning. And the reality is, if I let God have the small stuff, I probably wouldn't have all the emergencies, right? That's how that works. If the choir wants to come up, I'm going to land this thing in a minute. I've seen it said that some people only exist as an example of what we should avoid. And unfortunately, the lesson of Saul is primarily how not to live life. I'm trying to live my life so that more often I am an example to follow than a cautionary tale. So I'll ask you, did any of my 8 points hit you where you live? Now, hopefully there were some you can say, you know, I used to do that, and it's been a while. I really hope that there's some encouragement. You can say, I've gotten past that one. There's probably a couple that are ongoing in your life. You're aware of them. You're working on them. Good. And maybe, I hope there's one that God used to nudge you. Something that you've been trying to ignore. Something that you've been not aware of. Following Jesus is a journey. When we accept him, we get everything. Okay, it's not piecemeal. However, the Bible tells us that we work out our faith with fear and trembling. It is a lifelong journey. Seeing an issue we've not seen before can feel really discouraging. Oh, one more place where I'm failing. But what it really means is you're hearing the Holy Spirit, and that's a very good thing. If you're hearing the Holy Spirit, it's okay. God will deal with what needs to be dealt with, and you'll get there. And it's my prayer today that at least one of these has nudged you, that sometime in the next few hours or few days, you and God will have a discussion about that.